survey assignment using a program designed by surveyors, for surveyors, and specifically for your survey, completing your survey report entirely in the field. And I designed this software specifically for my survey reports. This wasn't a marketing venture or anything like this. This is purely as something designed out of necessity from my own life. And this software that we're going to talk about is the first and only marine report writing software designed entirely for completing your survey report in the field. And we do this by entering data on a touchscreen tablet rather than on a clipboard with a notepad and a pen. And I'm going to ask that we save any questions here until after the presentation. I'll be able to switch screens to see the audience or to be able to see the online questions that may come through. But I'll save a little time toward the end to be able to answer any questions that we may have. And I also do want to start out by saying that I am not a salesman or a marketing specialist. I'm a surveyor just like any of you sitting there watching this. And I'm only here because we created a solution to a problem that so many of us, including myself for the longest time, simply accepted as being part of the job. And this solution has proved so effective that it's beginning to spread like wildfire amongst the surveying community. And I hope by the end of this presentation, you'll also understand why. So I'm going to jump over to the presentation here. And I want to begin by saying that there is a problem with the surveying process. And we all know it well. It's the time that we spend writing reports. Over and over, I hear from surveyors who love what they do, but hate the late nights writing reports. It's an industry standard that for every hour that we spend out in the field, actually the enjoyable part, working on the boat, we'll typically spend that same hour at home in the office, either prepping, reviewing, or completing and retranscribing that entire survey report. And what we have to realize is that that effort of taking those handwritten field notes, returning home to start entering that information into the computer, is duplicating our effort. We're writing that information twice. So to better see this, let's look at a couple ways on how we collect data while in the field. For some of us, this is everything: a notepad and a camera, maybe a pen. But remaining consistent with this blank notepad and camera is virtually impossible. And it just opens you up to a world of emissions, inconsistencies, and possible liability risks. We don't have any guideline, any template, anything to be able to remain consistent from each assignment to the other. So what a lot of us will do is we'll create something like this: a nicely organized, clean and concise field notes. These headings, you may have multiple pages like this, and you'll sift through the pages to find the specific item that you're looking at while you're looking on the boat, because boats are not organized in the order that we write a report. So one of the fundamental, most difficult things that most of us face when we think about taking software in the field is locating that heading. So here it is, the handwritten field notes that would be taken into the field, something like this, and oftentimes, again, pages and pages of information like this. And the problem with this is even, or very frequently, a lot of us have had some sort of experience where these get smudged, dirty, wet, maybe they blow away in the wind. But what's even worse, because this happens every single time religiously, is these notes end up looking like this. And usually when I show this in a presentation, I get some laughs in the audience because we can all relate to this. This is familiar. This is something that all of us deal with. And when you have pages and pages of handwritten notes that look like this, I'm sure you're with me where you just begin dreading coming home at the end of the day to begin writing that report up. And all of this changed for me about 4 years ago when I realized that I could do this entire report while in the field. And I could take all my information collected in the field and not have to duplicate that effort when I got home at the end of the day. And I'm going to show you exactly how I got there. But before we do, I do want to show you a sample of the finished report, because I want us all to be on the right page and understanding that I'm very conscious about my survey reports, and I'm very concerned about the quality and content that goes into them. And this is not a checklist or a pre-made survey. This is something that you can customize the way that you currently write your surveys. So I do want to show you an example of what a finished report would look like. So here I'm just going to scroll through a few pages of a final report. And if I were sitting in your place right now, my skeptical brow would probably raise at any suggestion of saving time throughout the work process. When we think of saving time during a survey, we often associate that with cutting corners. And I know that we face far too much liability and too much responsibility to compromise anywhere on our report. And if anything, we should all be looking to strive toward adding more value and more content at every turn to our reports. The key of what I want to talk with you about today is not a compromise, but rather a solution to working more efficiently. And I'm going to show you how to create the full version of the sample report entirely in the field, which means no more writing reports when you get home at the end of the day and no more into the weekends and late hours of the night. So to better understand this, what I want to do is break down the parts that make up a common survey report. And all of this will make sense as we start getting on in this presentation here. So here we have a survey report, and I just want to talk about the basic structure that make up really this or any other survey report. For the most part, we studied a lot of surveys and different types to get something that was familiar to everyone here. And most survey reports will have some semblance of categories or sections throughout the layout. And these may be here, as you can see, vessel construction. It could be the safety equipment. It could be hull and bottom inspection. Whatever sections, these are the different categories within our survey report. And then usually within each category, we may have a number of subcategories. And within those, we would then have a number of headings. And each of these headings are the topic for the content that we're then going to add and collect in the report. And oftentimes we'll add images or additional material to help properly explain and show what it is that we're collecting. Now, we're there to collect the information, but most importantly, we're here to describe the condition of that vessel and very clearly lay out all of the deficiencies that are related to that. So the deficiencies are just as important and could be argued even to be the most important part of that survey. So a lot of us just organize that in a paragraph, maybe at the end or at the beginning of the report, which says, hey, these are the list of deficiencies. I like to organize these in order of priority. So what we have here, and this can be, this is very familiar, a lot of underwriters are familiar with this, a lot of surveyors already organize their reports in some semblance of priority by safety. So here we have three main safety priorities that we can organize the report by. So we have our A findings, which would typically be safety and compliance or critical components in the report. We have the B findings, which would be things that just need timely attention, but are still important. And then oftentimes C findings. Now, when you organize these in a Word document or a word processing software or program, it's very hard to keep the numbering and order of these prioritized findings in line. But when you use a program, whether it's this program or any really, it does help you to organize and keep these in a way that it's clear and concise. And this is such an important part of our report process, is to be able to deliver these deficiencies, especially to underwriters, especially to our client buying the boat or maybe just getting financing for it. All of these conditions are important ways where they would want to see a clear and concise breakdown of these items by safety. So presenting that findings report is just as important. And here are a few pages of a completed findings report done with our software. And again, I'm not here to show you how to make a survey or how to complete a survey or write a report. I know you are all very well versed in that already. But I did want to take this opportunity to show you what the final product is that we're talking about. And then we'll work backwards to show you how we create this. And I should also mention at this time that this concept, it was created purely out of necessity in my own life. In order to keep up with assignments and my general work week, my wife I would come home at the end of the day and I would start taking my handwritten field notes and start trying to transcribe those into the computer. And my wife would often feed me dinner right in front of my computer. And every time I tell the story, everyone else nods in agreement because they've all been there. You're all very familiar with this story here. And at the end of the night, usually by midnight, my goal was to reach halfway through my notes. It wasn't even close to being finished yet, just halfway through. And then the next morning, I'd wake up and go do another assignment, and the whole backlog would continue so that my weekend was just filled with just trying to catch up on all the reports from the previous week. And this is something that we all face. It's something we can just consider as part of the job. But once I realized that I was duplicating my work, that's when I started looking at how could I lay this out differently? How could I keep the same content that I was using and same value that I was giving, but I wanted to be able to enter this information in the field. So we went to the drawing board and started drafting up an idea on how we could navigate through the software quickly. And that's a key because whenever I took a Word document or or even the software that I was using at the time, and I took this into the field, one of the most difficult things was just to navigate to find the heading and information I needed to enter. So once we came up with an idea, something like what you see in here in the background, this drafted idea was the most important part because this was the key to rapid navigation. And this then lay the foundation for everything else to come. So please let me introduce to you InspectX. This is the first and only marine report writing software designed to complete an entire survey report while in the field. And let me just repeat a part of that. Complete the entire report in the field. And by that, I mean your inventory, your observations, the notes, your findings, your recommendations, everything. When I get home, I do the market value research, I review the report, and it's ready to be sent. Switching over from a handwritten field notes and a clipboard in the field to using a tablet is surprisingly easy. We're not the first to think of this concept. Many have tried before because when this works, the benefits and time savings are simply unquestionable. But if you've ever tried this, you may know that applications that are not specifically designed for entering data in the field, they're just cumbersome and difficult to use. But InspectX is different. And the key is having software that allows you to rapidly navigate between every heading and location that you need to get to throughout the report to be able to find that heading of that item that you're looking at. And the second part of that key is to be able to make an entry at that heading faster, or as fast even, as if you were writing them by hand and abbreviating and putting that in by hand. And if you can do those two things, then those two key criteria of completing a report in the field can be achieved. So let's take a look at how we do this in the field. Take a look at some of the layout and features of InspectX. From the very beginning, from the get-go here, InspectX is designed for making entries in the field. So from this background that you see here, you'll see we have this dark background with stark, bright, contrasting colors. And that's very intentional. Most of today's tablets already work very well in bright sunlight. But when you have this dark background and bright colors that stand out at you here, it makes that tablet even more readable in bright sunlight. So that's a very key thing. And you'll see all the buttons are very large. There's no necessity to have a keyboard or a mouse to be able to navigate and work your way around. Everything can be done by touch. So that's a very key important part. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is navigating through this layout. So I'll draw your attention to the top of the page here where we have our main categories. Remember we talked about that before in the layout? These buttons that you see at the top here, a single press on any one of these can navigate and change the layout or take you to that section of the report to make entries underneath that heading. So every button here relates to that section of the report. And when you click on any button, the buttons below that, the larger buttons, now change to reflect the contents of that category. And you can see we've got the large tubular headings there for the subcategories within each heading. And you can reorder or change the names of these. These are yours at free. You can change the names, you can reorder the buttons, and all of the while you're reordering the final report. So the order of these buttons directly relate to the order of the final report. To visually show you just how this layout correlates to a final report, what I want to do is we'll just bring attention to the safety category at the top there that's highlighted. And we're going to slide in a sample page of a finished report just to see how those headings relate to one another. And I've dimmed out certain sections of this report just so that we can focus on the ones that we've highlighted here. And you can see how the category that I've selected is safety equipment, and I'm pointing there at the safety equipment category. And the subcategory is, again, also the primary safety equipment or the required safety equipment. And then the heading, the highlighted button there, is the heading that's going to appear in the final report. The name of that heading is the name in the report, and the content that I place in that button is the content that goes into the report itself. So it's a direct correlation. And once we had that idea, that concept of how this layout can correlate to a final report, now with a single press, I can navigate to any area throughout the report. And that allows me to navigate faster than I could by flipping the pages of my field notes. So a very important part of it. So the next thing I want to draw your attention to is the colors that we're seeing on the page. We have a number of colors that are standing out, but that's very intentional. The colors all tell you the progress of how far you are along in the survey report and the survey itself while you're in the field. And these are the four main colors that we're talking about here. And in order to understand these better, I'm going to draw an analogy to a traffic light. So if we look at this light here, we can see that any of the buttons that are red are simply not started. That means we just don't have any content at that heading yet. So that's a very easy one to get through. The yellow ones are in progress, and this one I can't stress how valuable this particular heading is, or when you mark something in progress. This is something that we didn't realize when we first created the software, but turned out to be so valuable when you're working in the field. When you're using handwritten notes, and you begin making an entry at any heading, it's very hard to make it stand out in a way that you remember to come back and add more content there. And I'll give you an example. Perhaps it may be that you're entering the port engine serial number, and you're way outboard, stuck in a small hole, in order to obtain that serial number. And it's not convenient for you to now begin writing the starboard serial number because it's on the other side of the boat. You'd have to clamber all over to go and get there. So we leave it empty and we say, well, we'll come back to that. But when you're scanning through your paper document, it's pretty hard to remember or see. Nothing's highlighted to stand out to remind you that that needs to be completed. Well, here in software, we can have that highlighted in yellow. So it's a visual reminder that there's some information entered there, but it's not yet finished. It's in progress. And then finally, we have we have the completed heading. So once you have completed something, it turns green. And now you can still go back and make changes to that, but it visually represents that this particular heading is completed, and you know that, hey, that section is done. I don't need to make any more entries there. And finally, we have the not applicable, which again, you can still use any of the buttons that are grayed out, but it's a nice, easy visual way to just know that these sections are not going to be used in the report. When we take that same layout and we look back at our four buttons, we can immediately see that ePub is 100% complete. We can see that the man overboard system up here is in progress. We've entered some information, but it's not yet finished. And that the fire alarm system is not applicable. And firefighting system has no content in it yet at all. So if there is one on this boat, it's directing me and telling me that I need to go and enter that information there. So when we take the same concept of these colors and we look at the entire layout of the program, an amazing thing happens, because now we can visually see the progress of how far we are along in this report. We can see some buttons that are green. We can see some categories at the very top that are green and complete. And I know those entire sections of the vessel have been checked through. And I can even see a couple up there that are red and have no content at all. And that's a visual cue and a visual reminder of where I need to spend more attention during the survey process. And at the very top right, I can also see a percentage indicator. And that tells me how far along I am in this particular report, or survey process and report. Because I'm doing the two at the same time. I'm completing the survey and the report's being written for me in the background as I go through. So the next thing is, how do we change the color of these buttons? How do we change the progress of a button? And what we're going to do is we're just going to click on any button here to go in and see how that's done. This is the button entry page. So at the very top of this page is the status bar. And when you click on any one of these, this is how you would change the color and the status of the specific heading that we're in right now. The next little window beneath that, this is our entry value window. Whatever we type in here, this becomes the content that ends up in the final report. You're free to type anything you want here, that becomes the final report. Beneath that, and this is the very important part, this is a list of what we call quick insert options. These are phrases, sentences, headings, it could be pages of information, but all of this content is yours. You can customize and tailor all of this to the way that you write reports. In fact, you can copy and paste from your current layouts and paste these phrases here, and you can have as many as you want, which means that whether you're doing a cargo inspection or a yacht and small craft, it doesn't matter the type of inspection you're doing, you can have numerous options to fill in that information. And because you can have as many as you want here, you can custom tailor this particular layout to exactly how you want this report to be said. And you're not locked into those because you can always modify and change the content of the entry value specific to this particular boat. There's a number of ways that we can do that. First and foremost, if you have a laptop with a keyboard on it, well, you could just type on the keyboard and that would change anything in the entry value. If you're using a touch device, well, then you could just bring up the on-screen keyboard and begin typing and entering and making changes that way. If you have a stylus, you could use handwriting to text recognition, or if you have voice recognition on your tablet, you could just speak into it and automatically convert your voice to text. Now, while all of those things are convenient and fast, there's still nothing that beats the speed of just selecting one of those items in that list of quick insert options. And that's how we make an entry at any heading. But previously, we talked about the importance of creating findings at every single heading and being able to easily present the findings throughout our report. So that's also a very easy thing here. And I'll draw your attention to the top right of the page where we have this A, B, and C. And that directly correlates to what we had previously, where we could show the level of priority for a finding. And when I click on any one of these, I'm automatically taken to the findings page. And this is where I could now begin entering my deficiency under this heading. And at the very top of the page, I have my cancel and save buttons. These are pretty self-explanatory. But beneath that, I have the findings pane. And whatever I type here becomes the finding in the final report. And when I'm done typing that, and again, I should say as well, below that, you have a list of quick insert options. So all of the common findings that you're used to seeing, every time you see, in this case, that shore power cord with the burnt pin, instead of typing it out manually every time, you can just select something from the list. And the same way, I can quickly select and enter and change anything here in the recommendation pane, which means that now we can be a little more precise, even while working in the field. We can recall and bring up documented requirements, whether they're U.S. Coast Guard requirements in my area or MCA requirements in your area. You can make references to these specific requirements and automatically enter everything in there in one single press. So very easy to do. So now we can always change the priority of a finding even after creating it, and that's also very easy. I'll draw your attention over here where you got that highlighted A. And if at any point I wanted to change the priority of this, maybe I thought, well, this one wasn't quite so severe, and maybe I wanted to make it a B needing timely attention, I could just highlight and click on the B to change the priority. And automatically in the background, the software takes care of numbering and placing and ordering everything and formatting it as it should be. So very, very easy to create deficiencies wherever you are throughout the layout. And when I'm done, I just click Save, and I'm right back into the software to continue on through my survey report. So here's a feature at the end of the day. Once everything here is turned green, very often, especially if it's a pre-purchase scenario, we need to sit down and have a meeting with our client. And this is something that's so important, but also often something that's quite difficult to do when you're using handwritten field notes. What I would do personally is I would put a little asterisk in the margin of the page under every heading that had a deficiency, so that at the end of the day, I could scan through all my notes and see all the asterisks and then bring those up in topic at the end of the discussion with the client. The problem with that is it was very hard to relay that information in order of priority. And since that is such a critical component of all of our jobs, is to be able to properly relay the information, both in the report, but also verbally, I'm essentially doing my client a disservice by not being able to relate this in a clear, concise manner in order of safety for him or her. So being able to display all of the deficiencies in one place would be really useful. And with software, we can easily do that. We can have all of our deficiencies accumulated throughout this entire report, all displayed in one place. And what would be even better is if now we could filter these deficiencies and show just the A's. We can do that with software. And then we can just discuss each one of these line items with the client. And then we can filter to the B's or even the C's. So a very easy and clear way to be able to filter through and show those. So now we've finished with the meeting with the client and we're ready to go home. And this is where such an important part of our survey lies, is in the review of the report. And now, for so many of us, and myself included, for the longest time, when you get home at the end of the day and you begin writing that report, by the time you actually finish, it's probably close to midnight. You're tired, you're drained, trying to review the report becomes a chore, and it's the last thing, and we all brush over it. And the review, we end up, very often things can get forgotten or left in place or overlooked. Well, in this case, because the report is already written, all we're doing is reviewing all the entries we put in. So it's a real easy task. And we wanted to make it even easier by having a review mode built into the software. And in this mode, we can see the categories and sections of this particular report all broken out. And we can expand all of these to then see all of the content of this report that we've accumulated so far. And during this review, at any point, if I see a heading that needs to be adjusted or modified, I can click into that heading and make that change. So a very easy way to review the report at the end of the day. The software is tailored to show you exactly the information that you need to see, and helps by removing everything else that could be a distraction. So what I thought now would be a good thing to do is if we could all work together, and we'll simulate being in the field to make a few entries. So this portion of it, I was planning on doing a live demonstration and pretending as if we saw some objects on the boat, and we could just go ahead and make those entries into the software live. So I figured what we would do is we'd pick something that's common and that we're all very familiar with seeing. So here's the Marpole waste placard that should be posted on every single vessel. And sometimes it serves as, sometimes we include this into our survey reports by making a notation that it was observed. Maybe we'll include where. So I like to do that. I'm going to go and make this entry into the software. So I'm going to switch screens behind me here, and behind me now you can see the software live on my computer. And we're going to click into the safety category up here. And now looking in the safety equipment, I can see trash disposal placard here is a button. And you can see how the button is now red because there's no content in there yet. So it's serving not just as a place to make that entry, but in the field, it's also serving as a reminder to look for this placard. It's so easy that these boats could blend and merge into each other that we could easily forget and say, oh, was that on that boat or was it the previous one that I did where we saw this placard? Here, this is prevented because now it reminds us on every assignment the information that we should collect. So we'll click on Trash Placard, and I can now scan my list of quick insert options to find the most appropriate heading for the one that we want. And this looks pretty close on it right there. I can see the Marpole garbage placard was found properly displayed in the galley. But if it wasn't in the galley, maybe it was a different area, I'm not locked into that phrase. I can easily make any selection and change the location of where it was. So it's entirely flexible. It's entirely up to you to be able to choose what content you want placed at each heading. When you're done, you hit complete, and you can see now that trash placard has turned green. So that was nice and easy. I figured let's do another one together here, and another common one that we always see, and that could be an ePub. So nice and easy. Let's slide back over to the software, and that's still in the safety category here. And I can see the heading for it is ePub. It's right next to life rafts, a man overboard system. So I can click on the heading for ePub. Now I want to just get a reminder on what type of ePub that was. So we'll just look over here, and it's a Global Fix Pro. So I'll scan through this list, and I can see a number of different types of ePubs that are here. There's satellite, satellite 2, global fixes. I can see a number of ones. But since it's the Global Fix Pro, I can just choose that one from the list. Now, you don't have to be specific on the name brand and the type. That's just how I like to include it there. So you can add in just the information that you want to include. Maybe you just want to say ePub. But you can also, you're not limited to just selecting one item from the list. We can select multiples here. So we can then also check the ePub and see that its functional test was proven, and then we can make that selection and enter that as well. And then we can go a little further, and maybe we can look at the battery inspection, and we can then select the battery inspection and when it was valid until. And we can change it if it's needs any adjustments in there. We can maybe change the year. Very easy to adjust that. And then we can also make any little notations that as a surveyor I'd like to include in there, like maybe just re-register this with new ownership if the boat was for sale. So I can select multiple headings here and tailor and custom tailor this specific to this vessel, which is why this is not a checklist. This is something that's helping you to go through and enter specific information just as you would if you were writing this back at home. And when you're done, you hit complete, and that heading is done, and now you can see ePub has turned green. So very easy to make those entries. We'll do two more here. This picture here at the top right is an electrical outlet. It's a cigarette lighter outlet. And this one has a tester being placed inside and is reading a voltage at that heading. The one below that is a freshwater pump. So we'll go through and we'll make these two entries real quick in here. So the first one was electrical. I'll click over here to the electrical category. And you can see this category is separated by DC electrical and AC electrical. So since this is a DC outlet, I can see here the heading for DC power outlets. And when I click on that heading, I can just look through my list to find an appropriate one for it. And this one did look like it was at the helm, so I'll make that first selection. And I'll adjust the voltage to present exactly what I saw in the image. Click complete, heading done. And we'll scroll back to look at that freshwater pump. And whoops, sorry about that. Let me scroll back a few more. There we go, freshwater pump. And let's make the entry for that one. So this time I'll click into the water category, and I'll look here under freshwater system for that water pump. And I could see that it was a Mach 5 in the image here. And I like to be specific in my entries. So here I can actually see that it's a Mach 5 230 volt. Sometimes they're the 115s. And I can see I've got a selection sometimes for the 115, for the 230. And you can make your own headings in here. And again, this is only if you like to include this level of detail. You can have a number of other type of freshwater pumps in here. Maybe you just write freshwater pump and how it was demonstrated. But whatever content you put in, when it's right here written out at your fingertips, for me, I like to add more detail, since really it's no different from clicking one heading to the other. And I can add that much more value into my content, into my survey reports. Then I can also describe the condition and maybe that it powered up without fault. So just like that, I can make those two entries, click complete, and freshwater pump is now done. And you can see that now I've also completed this entire category. Freshwater systems category has now turned green. So I know, hey, I've done everything under freshwater systems, and I'm ready to move to another section of the boat. So this time I figured let's do some findings together. So here we have 4 blocks. The first one being the bitter end of an anchor chain that looks like it's permanently affixed to the vessel. Block number 2 looks like a shore power plug with some burnt markings on one of its pins. 3 looks like a windlass that's heavily corroded. We'll probably see that a lot. And number 4 is a navigation light with a pretty crazed lens on there. I'll get my head out of the way. So if you guys, maybe I can hear you through the microphones, maybe someone can yell out a number that they'd like to see the finding created on.
Number 4.
All right, number 4 it is. So let's slide over here and we're going to work on the navigation light. So for that one, I'm going to click into the safety category. That's where I have the navigation lights shown on. And give me a second here to bring my picture back in here. There we go. All right, so under the safety category, I have navigation lights over here in the top right. So I'm going to select that one. And maybe they did all illuminate, maybe they didn't. But in this case, we're going to create a finding. So I'm going to come up here at the top, and I'm going to select a priority for that finding. In this case, we'll say maybe it's an A because it may be diminishing the quality of the visibility of that light bulb. So we want that to be a priority finding that we bring in here. So I've got my whole list of all the common things that I see with navigation lights that they didn't illuminate. Maybe I can be specific about which one didn't illuminate. And here's one, looks like exactly what we're looking for. Masthead light's lens was UV heat crazed, which may hinder adequate nighttime illumination. So my finding is already written there. And if it wasn't the masthead light, it was the port navigation light, I could just change one word in here. And by writing that one word, I'm faster than what I could writing that out on a notepad. So I can be very specific, but also very quick at making these entries. And when I click on the recommendation, see what happens to this list beneath here? See how it changed there? So now when I click on the recommendation, the list below adjusts to help me make an appropriate recommendation. And here I could just say, replace the lens to ensure proper visibility. Just like that, I've created a deficiency and a recommendation, and I can click save, and I can see I've got an A finding, a 1A priority finding, and complete, and navigation lights is done. Great. So we have a couple other ones here, but I think because of the time, I'm going to skip through doing these. These are a couple other samples on just how easy it is to do these deficiencies. One thing I will show you is we'll use this high water alarms as an example, block number 1 here. And we'll go under the safety equipment and bilge high water alarms over here. And at any finding or any heading, you can create your own phrases in here, right? And I'll just show you by typing one in here, your unique phrase. And maybe you've typed this out, maybe you've cut it from your current survey report and pasted it in here. But once you do, you can add this to your list, and now your unique phrase appears right within this list of quick grab options. And you can reorder it. Perhaps you want to pick it up and drag it to the top, and we can do that. Wherever you place it, it's there and available for you on every other survey report that you do. which means that you can have multiple phrases, it's like having access to your entire database of previous survey reports right here while you're working in the field. So very, very powerful, convenient thing to have there. Good. So we'll skip doing this one here just for the sake of saving some time. The next thing I did want to bring up was how easy it is to modify the headings. You may have noticed that while we were working there in the safety category, I had reference to a US Coast Guard heading, which is obviously important for my region. But for you there in London and a lot of you watching online, you may want to adjust things like this for your own region. And this is something that's very, very easy to do. The entire software is completely customizable, not just the headings and the quick insert options like we talked about, but all of the layout, the headings themselves can all be adjusted to be specific. So here I can see that heading or that subcategory, US Coast Guard Safety Equipment. And simply by getting into here, I can change or delete. Maybe I can replace it with MCA, whatever I wanted in here. And when I save that, you can see that reference is now removed. So it's very easy to modify and change the content as you're working through here, either while you're in the field or in preparation for the survey reports that you are about to go and conduct. So very easy to do that. The more you customize these phrases as well, I should say, the faster you'll become. The more familiar you are with the software, the faster you become each time you use it. And a software program, I'm very well aware, cannot make you a surveyor. That comes only through knowledge and experience. But just like any tool in a surveyor's tool bag, the right software can be extremely valuable in the right hands. And I hope you see just how powerful a tool that this can be for you if you used it alongside the way you worked in the field. So let's move to another feature. And this one can be a complete game changer if you work as a team or ever take on apprentices or people following you in the field. And that is that multiple inspectors can work on the same report at the same time. So again, if you may have one person working in the bridge collecting all the bridge equipment, and you may have another person working in the engine room. And all the while, as you're both working on the software, you're both building into the same final report. And because I can see where someone else has been working, there's no need to duplicate. There's less need to have meetings throughout the day to ensure who's covered what area. And most importantly, we've eliminated the opportunity where each person could leave at the end of the day thinking that the other has checked something and it accidentally get slipped between the cracks. So having this tool where we can see the progress as we're each working here is very, very valuable and important for working and collaborating together in the field. But even if you don't utilize this, even if you don't work as a team or to go two people into the field, you'll still take advantage, or very likely, of the same feature because it means you can network at home. And what that means in a nutshell is instead of working on a 10-inch or a 12-inch tablet when you're out in the field and coming home and being forced to continue to review your report and add your photographs with that smaller tablet, I can open it up on my large screen computer at my office desk, the computer I'm already familiar with using. And I did not need to transfer or copy any files over to do that. It would seamlessly open from a browser and I could continue on where I left off. The networking thing is a very, very convenient and easy thing to do, and I will help you set that up in your own home when the time came around for you to try this. There's so many features in the software, and we can only really scratch the surface with some of them here. But in this presentation, we've covered some of the top ones, and I did want to just recap on what the software would do for you. So on every survey assignment we've discussed here, that this software will save you time. And we've already covered that. And oftentimes our users have claimed 50% because of the time that it takes to duplicate all that effort. We can essentially cut out almost 50% of each assignment that we do. You'll be able to increase quality. And I'm not just saying in the survey report itself. Most of us we're all very proud of our survey reports and the content that we put in there. But when I say increase quality, I'm talking more about your survey process, about having those reminders at every single heading of the content that should be collected or that you want to be collected, and being reminded and consistent with each time you do that. These two things together allow you to increase profitability. And not just in the case where you can do one assignment right after the other because the report is done immediately once you get home, but more in the way, and I've experienced this many times myself, where brokers have approached me and clients have rehired me on assignments because they know that I'm showing up to the assignment with the latest technology available to me. I have a tablet in my hand with a clear, concise layout of all of the content that I need to collect throughout that day. And brokers or people that are calling me or hiring me for assignments, they know that I'm going to be performing the same survey on boat Y as I did on boat X last week, because I've got a clear, concise layout of everything to collect on there. And that's generated even more business. Because you have this clear, concise layout, this reduces liability. We can be consistent with every single report, and it significantly reduces our liability of omitting or leaving anything out. And all of these features in a user-friendly and easy package to use. All software takes a little training curve, but this is very user-friendly, very, very easy to pick up and start using. So let's take a look at a final report again, and we're just going to scroll through some pages of that here. When we first started with the software, we started polling a lot of users, a lot of clients, and how they were looking at that finished survey report. And by a large margin, almost all of them were viewing the report on some form of digital viewer, be it a computer, a tablet, or even a phone. And we wanted to bring the best experience possible in a PDF document to help them understand this report. So at any point while they're reviewing the report, they can click up here at the top right and open a table of contents. And this table of contents will allow them to view and easily see all of the layouts or all of the content that they've placed into, or that you've placed into this report, and easily jump to any section there. In this case, we'll click on the findings and recommendations section of the report, and we'll jump straight down there to that clearly laid out and well-presented list of deficiencies. And you can see again, the images are placed in here. I should say as well, at every single heading, you can choose to place images here. Images are very easy to insert at the headings, at the findings, or just in a photos appendix at the end of the report. So now we'll jump back to the main body of the report here, and I'll draw your attention to this little bold icon here that's C1 underneath general exterior condition. And this is how we could now present that there is a finding related to this heading. I could choose to show it right in the body there if I wanted. I like this layout personally, where I can just make a big bold heading that shows there's a finding there. But what's even better is that is actually a clickable link. So your client can click on that in the PDF and automatically navigate down to the finding section for that specific finding. And they can read it, see the photographs, anything attached there. And when they're done, they can click on the heading, and it's a return link back to where they were reviewing previously. So it allows a seamless movement through the survey report and a very clear and concise, efficient PDF for them to view. So if at this point you're ready to try this yourself, I have some good news, because InspectX is free to download. You can put it on as many computers as you want. There's no limitation to licensing on how many computers it can be installed on. So you can test it on your office computer or your home computer. It doesn't matter. You can install it on as many as you want. You'll receive you'll be able to customize the layout of that survey report. You can tailor, just like I showed you, removing the US Coast Guard references, adding in your own content, copying and pasting from your current surveys, and pasting it into this layout that's all private for yourself on your own computer for you to see and test for yourself. You'll receive the continued program updates. We're as a survey community here, so I'm always hearing good advice and good suggestions from people on what should be added into the software. So we're continuously working on this and adding and bringing new features and enhancements, and everyone can benefit from these changes as we move ahead. You'll receive email and telephone support, and all of that is directly to me, to another surveyor like you working in the field. And I want to say at this point that I encourage you to call me and reach out, because I do help. I do live demonstrations like this, and I can log into your computer and help you set this up in a way that for your specific types of surveys. We can discuss if this would work for you and how to implement this into your current workflow. On top of that, you'll also receive a ton of detailed content. All of the headings that we saw there and all of those quick insert options, they're all included in the software. So while I encourage you to copy and paste your own information and your own database of surveys into here, you'll already start with a huge database. In fact, this is my business partner's 27 years of experience surveying here in Florida, and he's input all of this data into here already as a really good platform for you to begin with. And all of this just for $39 per project. Now, this is not a monthly fee. You only pay once per project, which means you can still go back and make as many changes as you want to that without incurring another charge. And this small publishing fee is less than the cost of a transcriptionist. And if it saved you just even 1 hour of report time labor, that would make it worth it. But all of our users are claiming that this software usually cuts their time down in half. And remember that every time you use it, you become more familiar and your process becomes faster and faster. So there are a number of computer options available for what you could use to begin using this in the field. It does require a Windows computer to be installed on, but after that, you can then use an iPad or an Android or anything else. The ones that I recommend the most are going to be something that has Windows on as the foundation. And here would be a good example, a Surface Pro. I'm not going to go into this too much detail here. I'm watching the time, and I want to save some time for any questions at the end here. But there are a number of tablet options, and I encourage you, again, call me. I've tested a lot of these myself in the field, so I'm quite familiar with them, and I could offer something that would be specifically suited for the way that you survey. So call me, and I could help you talk through some of these. The main reason I'm showing you these is because the tablets themselves can be very affordable. In fact, this one on the screen here, I buy them refurbished off of eBay for less than $300 US. So even this portion of it is not an investment or an investment entry to begin doing this. And if you have a Windows computer at home right now, you're immediately available to go ahead and download this and try it out for yourself. Good. So armed with this new information, I want you to know that you have many options to create a polished and professional report entirely by working in the field. And no longer does this have to be you. InspectX solves a problem that so many of us know so intimately. And in an industry that's constantly requiring more and more from each of you, here's something that doesn't just help you meet that demand, but actually gives you something back in return. And that something is worth far more than the small publishing fee, and that is your time. So I want to thank you all very, very much for your time here today. And I will put some details behind me here in a moment with the website address to be able to go and look for more information on this software, as well as our Facebook page and Instagram. We try to stay current on all of these so that you can get new updates and new changes. We can hear, I want this to be an open forum community because just like you, I'm a surveyor and I'm always looking to grow my reports, my content. And I want this to be a community where we all grow together, sharing this information. So thank you again very much for your time, everyone.
I think there's the round of approval for you. So